You're on a flight, you've got your headphones in. You're already planning what snack you'll destroy the moment the seatbelt sign turns off. Then the captain comes on, calm like they're announcing the weather. We'll be taking a longer route today due to airspace restrictions. And your brain goes, airspace restrictions? Like the sky has a gate? Like someone put a do not enter sign on the clouds? Here's the wild truth. During international tensions, invisible walls pop up in the sky and on the ocean. Planes and ships don't just go straight. They go where they're allowed, and what they're allowed can change fast, sometimes in hours. This matters to you even if you've never worn a uniform or stared at a world map for fun. Because when airspace closes or sea routes become risky, flights get longer, tickets get more expensive, deliveries get delayed, fuel costs rise, and suddenly your simple world feels less simple. So today we're going to make this easy. No jargon soup, no military analyst voice. Just the real story like we're sitting together and you're asking, okay, so who actually controls the sky and the sea when countries are beefing? The sky is not free. It's organized like a giant playroom. Let's start with the sky. Most people think the sky is like a wide open field. You just fly. But the sky is more like a giant playroom with tape on the floor. There are sections, rules, supervisors. And if somebody says, nobody plays in this corner today, you don't argue with the tape. In aviation, one of the biggest sections is called a Flight Information Region, or FIR. An FIR is basically a big chunk of airspace where a specific authority provides essential services like flight information and alerting. ICAO describes FIRs as defined airspaces that provide essential flight information and alerting services for planning and safety. So when a plane flies across the world, it's not just floating through emptiness. It's moving from one managed zone to another, like passing through neighborhoods with different traffic controllers. And here's the important part. Countries have a lot of control over the airspace above their territory. If tensions rise, they can restrict it, close it, or warn airlines that it's unsafe. That's when the invisible walls start appearing. The magic world that changes everything, NOTAM. Now, how do pilots and airlines learn about these invisible walls? They don't find out by vibes. They find out through something called a NOTAM. A NOTAM is basically a super important heads-up message for flights. The FAA explains that a NOTAM is information essential to flight operations, but not known far enough in advance to be published by other means, and it's used to announce abnormal conditions in the air system. So think of NOTAMs as sticky notes in the sky. Runway closed. Navigation system down. Military activity here. Don't fly through this box of air right now. And in international tensions, those last ones can get serious. Because a NOTAM can be the difference between a normal flight path and a massive detour that adds hours and cost. When tensions rise, the sky gets rerouted like traffic. Here's the part people don't realize. Airlines are constantly making decisions like a very expensive version of Google Maps. Except instead of avoid traffic, it's avoid danger. When tensions flare, governments may close airspace temporarily. Or airlines may choose to avoid certain corridors, even if they're technically open, because open doesn't always mean safe. Reuters reported a clear example in May 2025 during escalating India-Pakistan tensions. Airlines rerouted or canceled flights, and Pakistan temporarily closed its airspace, disrupting international flights and forcing detours. So yes, a political situation on the ground can literally bend the shape of the sky for everyone above it. And there's another modern twist that makes this scarier. Reuters also mentioned aviation industry concerns about GPS spoofing, which is basically messing with navigation signals. Imagine you're driving and your phone suddenly insists you're in the ocean. Now imagine that at 35,000 feet. That's why airspace control isn't just about permission. It's about safety, technology, and risk. The conflict zone problem. Here's the uncomfortable truth. In some parts of the world, the sky itself becomes part of the conflict, which is why there are systems and guidance focused specifically on flying over or near conflict zones. ICAO has a dedicated conflict zones page describing its risk assessment manual for civil aircraft operations over or near conflict zones, covering risks from deliberate attacks and unintended impacts, and even giving guidance on airspace closures and reassessment afterward. IATA also publishes conflict zone guidance for airlines, high-level recommendations, and considerations for managing safe operations over, into, and near conflict zones. In plain language, this is the aviation world saying, if the area is unstable, don't treat it like normal air. And that's how control happens in the sky during tensions. Not just by one switch that says open or closed, but by layers of warnings, risk assessments, and airlines choosing safety over speed. So, who actually decides? Here's the simple version. Governments control their airspace rules and can issue restrictions and closures. Aviation authorities spread those changes through things like NOTAMs. International organizations like ICAO provide frameworks and risk guidance, especially for conflict zones. Airlines then make operational decisions, sometimes avoiding areas even if they're open, because their job is to get everyone there alive, not to win a contest for straightest line. That's why your flight from A to B sometimes takes the scenic route around entire countries. Now let's talk about the ocean. Okay, the sky has invisible walls. The ocean has invisible lanes. And just like the sky, the ocean is not free space. It's organized, watched, and during tensions, sometimes controlled in ways that can feel dramatic once you notice them. Here's the easiest way to picture it. The ocean is full of moving dots too. Ships are constantly broadcasting who they are and where they are using something called AIS, or Automatic Identification System. The International Maritime Organization explains that SOLAS, also known as Safety of Line at Sea, regulations require AIS to be fitted on ships of 300 gross tonnage and up on international voyages, and on all passenger ships regardless of size. So ships can automatically prove information to other ships and coastal authorities. So yes, a lot of global shipping runs on something like a giant Find My Friends for ships. And when tensions rise, those dots matter, because choke points, narrow passages like straits, turn into pressure points. And pressure points are where rules tighten, warnings increase, and costs jump. But the ocean doesn't use NOTAMs. The ocean uses its own language. The ocean's version of a warning label. When something becomes dangerous at sea, like a new hazard, a threat, or a situation that could force route changes, mariners receive navigational warnings. NAVARI, or Navigational Area Warnings, are designed to give ocean-going mariners the safety information they need, including hazards and information that may require changes to planned routes. The International Hydrographic Organization also notes that navigational warnings are part of approved broadcast systems, and web postings don't replace official broadcasts. Translation: ships don't just freestyle. They're constantly getting updates about what's safe. And during international tensions, those warnings can spike because the sea becomes unpredictable fast. The part that hits your wallet. Now here's the "who knew this mattered" moment. Even when ships can legally go through a tense area, they might choose not to because of risk, and risk has a price tag. Reuters reported that during the Red Sea crisis, war risk insurance costs for shipping surged, with premiums rising from around 0.3% to around 0.7% of a ship's value, with some quotes reaching 1%. That's not a small fee. For a ship worth tens of hundreds of millions, that's a giant bill just to pass through one region. So companies reroute. They take longer paths. They burn more fuel. They deliver later, and those costs ripple into everything. The price of goods, the availability of items, the stability of supply chains. And that's why route control during tensions isn't just a military story. It's a life story. Because when the sky and sea get tense, your world gets slower and more expensive. And here's where it gets really interesting. Because the next step isn't just warnings and reroutes. When tensions rise high enough, control can become physical. Escorts, convoys, exclusion zones. Ships deciding whether to broadcast AIS normally or get quieter for safety. Airlines calculating risk not just from borders, but from missiles, spoofing, and rapidly changing threat pictures. And the crazy part is, most of this happens without a big announcement. The world simply bends its routes, which is exactly what we're about to walk through next. What control looks like when it moves from paperwork and warnings into real-world enforcement, and how a single choke point can squeeze half the planet's trade like a hand around a straw. Let's talk about that hand around a straw, because the planet has a few places where the sky and the sea get squeezed into narrow funnels, and during international tensions, those funnels become the main stage. Choke points, the narrow doorways of the world. If the ocean is a giant backyard, choke points are the gates. Ships can't just teleport from the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean. A lot of them pass through tight places like the Bab el-Mandeb Strait near the Red Sea, where geography forces ships into lanes. And here's a detail that makes it feel real. Industry transit guidance points out that Bab el-Mandeb is so narrow that when ships travel northbound inside the traffic separation scheme, They can be as close as about 7 nautical miles from the Yemeni coastline. That's not far away out in the ocean. That's close enough that danger doesn't need a long commute. So when tensions rise in a choke point, the world doesn't have unlimited alternate doorways. It has a few, and everyone starts asking the same question at the same time. Do we go through, or do we go the long way around? The ocean's traffic lanes. You know how roads have lanes so cars don't crash into each other? The sea has a version of that too, especially in crowded or narrow areas. Those lanes are often organized through things like traffic separation schemes. Basically, ships going this direction stay on this side, ships going the other direction stay over there. During calm times, this keeps maritime traffic orderly. During tense times, it also concentrates traffic, which is good for coordination and bad if you're trying to avoid being noticed. That's one reason tensions can feel scarier at sea than people expect. You can't always just take a different street. Sometimes there's only one street. When control gets physical, escorts and naval presence. In the sky, control often looks like closures and reroutes. At sea, during serious tensions, control can start looking like something you can literally point at. Warships providing protection, advising routes, or escorting vessels. A clear modern example is the Red Sea crisis. The EU created a maritime security operation called UNAVFOR Aspides, with the strategic aim of providing an EU naval presence in the area where attacks occur to help ensure safe passages of ships. And even if you've never thought about naval missions in your life, the concept is simple. When ships are under threat, some governments put armed guardians in the neighborhood to reduce the risk. But here's the part that feels like a twist. Protection isn't always automatic. Ships may have to request it, coordinate it, and time it because there aren't infinite warships available, and the ocean is big. Reuters reported in June 2025 that Red Sea marine traffic rose about 60% from its low point, with an EU commander describing how Aspides escorted hundreds of vessels while operating with limited resources and sometimes delays for protection. That's control in real life, not a magic shield over the entire sea. More like a limited number of lifeguards covering a very long beach. The "call this number if something goes wrong" system. Now let's get to one of the most quietly important parts of sea route control during tensions: reporting and communication. When things get dangerous, ships don't just sail and hope for the best. They join voluntary reporting schemes and share their position with coordination centers, so that if something happens, there's a plan. UKMTO, United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations, describes itself as a key point of contact that supports mariners by providing validated security alerts, and it runs a voluntary reporting scheme in the region. There's also MSCIO, or Maritime Security Center Indian Ocean, which explicitly encourages vessels to report positions while operating in the voluntary reporting area, acting as a liaison with military forces. If you want the 5-year-old version, it's like telling a trusted adult, "Here's where I am, here's where I'm going." So if you don't show up, someone knows where to look, and if danger appears, someone can warn you. That's control too, not control like ownership, but control like coordination. Going dark, when ships stop broadcasting. Now here's where the ocean story gets spicy. Remember AIS, the system ships use to broadcast identity and location? The International Maritime Organization explains that AIS is required under SOLAS for many ships on international voyages and passenger ships, so ships can automatically provide information to other ships and authorities. But during international tensions, some ships consider switching it off or limiting what they broadcast, basically trying to become harder to track. Sounds smart, right? Like turning off your phone location when you don't want anyone following you? Except the ocean has a cruel sense of humor. Turning AIS off can make you harder for everyone to track, including the people who might protect you. Revised Maritime Security Guidance referenced by BIMCO notes that switching off AIS can make tracking marginally more difficult, but it may also hinder the ability of the military to provide support or direct contact. And ships with AIS on or off have still been attacked. So a ship captain can be stuck with a very unfair choice: be visible and risk being targeted, or be invisible and risk not getting help fast. That's the kind of international tension math that keeps shipping managers awake at night. Warnings, warnings, warnings. Just like pilots get NOTAMs, mariners get navigational warnings. These aren't random blog posts. They're part of structured systems meant to get safety information out quickly. The joint IMO/IHO/WMO framework standardizes how navigational warnings are drafted, and broadcast through services like naval warnings. In normal times, that might mean storms, hazards, broken buoys. During tensions, it can mean threat areas, advised corridors, or risk notices that push ships to change speed, change lanes, or change the entire route. This is one of those you never notice it until it changes systems. Most people don't realize the ocean has an information network until the information becomes urgent. The sky's version of do not enter. Now let's hop back into the sky, because airspace control during tensions can be even faster and more dramatic. In aviation, one country can close a chunk of airspace and suddenly global routes have to bend around it like a river around a rock. A very clear example: EASA's Conflict Zone Advisory for Ukraine references a NOTAM stating that multiple Ukrainian flight information regions are closed for civil aviation flights, and it reminds operators that the affected airspace is an active conflict zone. That's airspace control in the most direct form. This area is closed, no debate, plan around it. But there's also the not technically closed but risky layer, and that's where guidance steps in. EASA publishes Conflict Zone Information Bulletins, or CZIBs, which are advisories issued when airspace is identified as high risk to make information public for operators. And ICAO publishes a Conflict Zone Risk Assessment Manual for civil aircraft operations over or near conflict zones, laying out how operators assess and mitigate risk, including airspace closure and reassessment processes. In plain terms, the system is built so that even if you're not a government, you don't have to guess. There are frameworks telling airlines, here's what to consider before you fly near trouble. The Russia problem and why flights get longer. Here's a super relatable way this hits normal people: flight times and ticket prices. When big chunks of airspace become politically unavailable, airlines can't use the shortest routes. That can completely reshape the economics of travel. Reuters reported in August 2024 that British Airways decided to suspend flights to Beijing, noting the broader challenge for European carriers of being unable to fly over Russian airspace, which increases flight time and costs while Chinese carriers can still use those routes. So yes, international tensions can literally decide whether a route is profitable, which decides whether a flight even exists, which decides whether your easy direct trip becomes a long connection with a 4 a.m. layover and a sandwich that tastes like regret. That's route control without a single fighter jet in sight, just politics changing the map. The surprise ending: the world doesn't stop, it detours. If there's one big takeaway from all this, it's that international tensions rarely freeze the world. They bend it. The sky reroutes, the sea reroutes, companies adjust, warning systems light up, escorts appear, reporting increases, insurance spikes, schedules change, and your everyday life feels it in small ways like delayed packages, longer flights, and higher prices without you ever seeing the invisible walls that caused it. And sometimes, after months of detours, the world cautiously tests the old route again. Reuters reported in December 2025 that Maersk said one of its vessels successfully navigated the Red Sea and Bab al-Mandeb for the first time in nearly 2 years, a cautious step toward resuming use of the Suez route after companies had rerouted around Africa following attacks. That's the reality. The world doesn't flip a switch back to normal. It tiptoes. So when international tensions rise, control of airspace and sea routes isn't just one person closing the sky or owning the ocean. It's a whole stack of systems working at once: government restrictions, official advisories, safety warnings, risk assessments, escorts, reporting networks, and companies making hard choices about danger versus delay. And the craziest part is how invisible it all is, until your flight takes 3 extra hours and you suddenly realize the sky has rules. If you want more videos that explain the hidden system running the world, hit like, subscribe, and tell us what you want to watch next.